of the anti-immigrant policies of this White House. I mean, that seems to be the one thing. Well, there are two things, to be fair, that Donald Trump has remained steadfast and consistent about throughout his administration. It is the only two things that they've been able to achieve. One is massive tax cuts, many of which actually just benefit specifically Donald Trump, but also largely corporations. The second thing is to make it U.S. policy, stated policy, to intimidate, to harass, to marginalize, to deport, to criminalize immigrants, refugees, people who are here because of civil wars, people who are here because of violence, because of natural disasters, people who are here simply because they want to make better lives for themselves and their children. I've got a story from the New York Times of children who have diseases who are being kicked out of the country. They've been here on deferred action because of illness. Jonathan Sanchez looking to be deported to Honduras. If he is, he will die, writes Jorge Ramos in the New York Times opinion. 16-year-old suffers from cystic fibrosis, the same illness that killed his older sister. Though the government official who sent Jonathan's parents a letter telling them they should leave the United States within a month didn't seem to care. What will happen if you're sent back to Honduras? I asked him during an interview. Well, basically, I will die, he told me. He was talking from near Boston Children's Hospital, where he receives a treatment that's helping him deal with a lethal cough. Among other things, cystic fibrosis causes a buildup of mucus in the lungs that cannot be removed. If I miss treatment for one day, I start coughing a lot. I get tired. I find it hard to breathe. I have stomach aches and I can't digest food. This is going on around the country. And not only with people who are here, this 16-year-old apparently does not have documents, does not have citizenship here. There's about 1,000 people in this country who benefit from life-saving program this year, which is that deferred enforcement because of illness. They're all going to get booted. Meanwhile, yesterday we reported on what was happening coming from a ship from the Bahamas. An investigative reporter from Florida was on that boat. And do we have footage? What's the name of the reporter?
Brian Enton up here.
Brian Enton. And he had footage that we played for you yesterday where he interviewed a couple of people who were getting kicked off this boat. The last minute they're on the boat, they're being told that all of a sudden, for the first time ever, they need a visa to go to the United States. That the normal documentation wasn't going to work. Here's a dad with his daughter being thrown off the boat. These are people who have nowhere, obviously, where to go. They're evacuating.
And normally you can travel, right?
The Bahamas.
Yeah, normally you can use police record by way of airplane at least. Yeah.
So you have to take your baby off?
Yes.
Okay, and so that was one of 119 people who were had to leave the boat. I want you to just take a look at the folks that are coming off. A lot of them holding kids. A lot of them are kids walking off. Men, women, just people who are escaping because of the massive destruction that took place in the Bahamas. Supposedly, the CPB officials claimed that when they were interviewed in Florida, that, oh, no, this was a function of the cruise line, of the boat operators. They just didn't want to do what they needed to do or whatever it was. However, here is Donald Trump explaining, no, we had to kick all those children and parents and people off that boat to save America.
All about here to offer temporary protection status to people from the Bahamas.
So we're talking to a lot of different people on that. You know, we're recovering from the hurricane also. Florida did get hit, not as hard as we anticipated. And you look at Georgia, you look at South Carolina, North Carolina. I'm going to North Carolina right now, North Carolina, to have a rally for Dan Bishop. But before I go to the rally, we're going to be stopping at one of the sites that got hit very hard by the hurricane. So we're also recovering from a hurricane, but we have to be very careful. Everybody needs totally proper documentation because the Bahamas had some tremendous problems with people going to the Bahamas that weren't supposed to be there. I don't want to allow people that weren't supposed to be in the Bahamas to come into the United States, including some very bad people and some very bad gang members and some very, very bad drug dealers. So we are going to be very, very strong in that. Let me just explain.
Pause. Hold on. Let me explain something too. All these people had passports. All these people had passports and had been certified by the police. That is what is typically needed to get into the United States. So he's lying. He's lying about that.
Large sections, believe it or not, of the Bahamas were not hit. And what we're doing is bringing the people to those sections of the Bahamas that have not been hit. We've done a lot of the USA aid. We've done a lot of work with our Coast Guard, with our FEMA people who have been phenomenal.
So, in other words, we can't let these people in because they're criminals. But actually what we're really doing is just taking them to other places in the Bahamas, which is okay. Now, clearly, I am sure there are other places in the Bahamas that weren't hit nearly as much. Maybe more or less, nothing more than a tropical storm. But the people who are on this boat obviously are coming because they have family in the United States. And we just have an administration that hates immigrants, particularly when they are not of the same complexion as Donald Trump. I mean, it's irrefutable. And the idea that in this type of it's just amazing to me there isn't more outcry about this. It's disgusting. It really is disgusting.
Yeah. There were about 300 people there at the last Close the Camps action that I went to in New York, and there should be thousands of people at this point in time. At this point in the journey, shall we say.
I think people have just become, I don't know, exhausted, or I have no idea what it is. But it's, in part, frankly, this, I think largely this is a function of the demobilization that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer have overseen by tamping down the investigations and just the assault on the Trump administration. I mean, look, here's the bottom line about this, about impeachment. This is sort of a side note. The founders of this country, the people who wrote the Constitution, they contemplated Donald Trump. Not him exactly, but they contemplated a person like Donald Trump being president, that there could be someone of this ilk who is problematic, who is enriching themselves, who is flaunting the Constitution and different statutory requirements, et cetera, et cetera. What they did not contemplate was Nancy Pelosi, was an opposition party that just says, no biggie, people have the chance to vote him out. We don't need to do anything because people will vote him out. They did not contemplate that. They gave the apparatus for an opposition party, or theoretically, I guess the same party, to deal with a Donald Trump. They did not anticipate that they would not use it. And so when we think about what has gone wrong in the United States, just in this very limited, we're talking about a very limited issue set here, because obviously a lot of other problems that Donald Trump is symptomatic of. But when we talk about why Donald Trump is in office with no threat And I know they're doing stuff now at the Judiciary Committee, but Nancy Pelosi successful, mission accomplished. But that just purposefully denying refugees from a natural disaster the ability to come to this country, 125 people. That should be like the latest thing that is added into the inquiry. An inquiry that should have been already in operation for 6 months. And when we look back on this era, when historians look back and say, what went wrong in terms of the way that the country could deal with Donald Trump, it's going to be Nancy Pelosi. That is the aberration here. It's going to be Nancy Pelosi was the sort of flaw in the system that was not contemplated. That you would have an opposition party that would just say, he'll impeach himself. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah, I'm mad about it.